Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Evan's voice again, cold, careless, and cruel. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I had gone wrong. By morning, the sun had already filled the room, but I still felt trapped in the dark. My hands trembled slightly as I made my coffee. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even turn on the television. I just sat at the kitchen table, thinking about the boy who once used to run around this house, chasing the smell of pancakes his mother used to make. Evan hadn't always been like this. When he was little, he was quiet and kind, the kind of boy who'd rescue birds with broken wings and sneak candy into my pockets when he thought I looked sad. But somewhere along the way, after college, something changed. He became restless, always wanting more. It started with small loans, a few thousand here and there. He said it was for business, but the money disappeared faster than I could ask about it. Then came the lies, first about his job, then about the debts. When I finally refused to help him anymore, he stopped calling altogether. Clara entered his life around that time. I remember the first day I met her. She came to dinner in a red dress, polite and charming, with a kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Linda had liked her at first. She said Clara had ambition. I didn't see ambition. I saw hunger. After Linda passed, things fell apart completely. Evan came to the funeral, but he barely spoke to me. He just stood by Clara, silent, staring at the will documents like they were written in gold. That was 3 years ago. Now, as I stirred my coffee, I realized that every cold word, every distance, had been leading to this, a son willing to see his father gone for a house and a piece of land. The phone rang suddenly, breaking my thoughts. It was Miles. "Harold," he said. His voice was firm but not unkind. "I've been thinking about what you told me. You sure you heard them clearly?" "I'm sure," I replied quietly. "Every word." "Then listen carefully," Miles continued. "If what they're planning is real, we can't rush. They'll expect you to react, maybe even to panic. But if you act calm, they'll believe you don't know. That gives us time." "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Invite them for Thanksgiving," he said simply. I hesitated. "You want me to bring them here, after what I heard?" "Yes," Miles said. "If they're plotting something, it'll happen when they think you're most vulnerable. That's when we'll be ready. I'll be nearby. We'll gather proof before they even realize it." I didn't answer at first. The thought of seeing their faces again, pretending everything was fine, made my stomach twist. But then I remembered Linda's last words before she died. Keep the family together, no matter how hard it gets. Maybe this was the only way to do that, even if it meant walking into danger. "All right," I finally said. "I'll invite them." After I hung up, I walked into the living room and sat by the fireplace. The house creaked softly as the wind blew outside. On the mantel stood a framed photo of our family, taken the year Evan graduated college. Linda was beaming with pride. Evan had his arm around her shoulders, his smile wide and genuine. I picked up the photo and brushed the dust from its edge. "I don't know what happened to our boy, Linda," I whispered, "but I'm going to find out. I promise you that." Later that afternoon, I called Evan. He answered after a few rings. "Dad," he said, pretending surprise, "didn't expect you to call." "I thought I'd check on you too," I replied calmly. "It's been too long since we had a proper Thanksgiving together." There was a pause on the line. I could almost hear him thinking. Then, with forced warmth, he said, "Sure, Dad, that sounds great. Clara will be thrilled." But I could tell he was lying. His tone was too smooth, too careful. "Good," I said. "I'll see you next week. Bring whatever you like." "Will do," he replied. "See you soon." When the call ended, I stared at the silent phone in my hand. For a brief moment, I almost felt something like hope, but it faded quickly. I knew better. They were coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one caught unprepared. The afternoon sun spilled gently through the lace curtains of my study. I had just finished polishing the old oak table where my wife used to sit and read. The house was quiet, too quiet, so I decided to call my son, Evan. Thanksgiving was only a week away, and I wanted to invite him and his wife over for dinner. When he answered, his voice was cheerful at first. "Hey, Dad," he said. "We were just talking about you." That warmed me. For a second, I thought Maybe things were finally getting better between us. We hadn't spoken properly in months, not since that argument about the money. We spoke briefly about the weather, about how cold November had become. Then, suddenly, Evan said, "Hold on a second, Dad. Clara's calling me. Don't hang up." He placed the phone down somewhere, but I could still hear the faint shuffle of footsteps and voices. I was about to end the call when I caught Clara's voice sharp, annoyed. Is greater than, "He's inviting us again? Why can't he just stop pretending he cares?" Evan's reply came, low but clear. "It's greater than, let him. That old man won't last the day after our Thanksgiving surprise." My breath froze. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. But then, Clara's laughter followed, cruel and certain. "Is greater than good. Once he's gone, the house will be ours." Finally, some peace. The words echoed in my ear like thunder. My hand trembled as I lowered the phone. Every part of me wanted to shout, to demand what they meant, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the family photo on my desk. It was from last year's Thanksgiving. My late wife, Linda, had stood beside me with her arm around Evan's shoulder. Clara was next to him, smiling wide. Looking at that picture now, their smiles felt like lies. I pressed the end button quietly. My chest tightened with something heavier than anger. It was disbelief. My only son, the boy I had raised alone after his mother's long illness, was plotting against me. For minutes, I didn't move. The ticking of the clock on the wall grew louder with each second. The world outside carried on as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I walked slowly to the old cabinet by the window. Inside, tucked behind old books and photo albums, was a small card with a number written in fading ink. Miles Carter. He was an old friend of Linda's, a detective who had helped her once during her charity years. A good man, the kind of man who knew how to handle quiet trouble. My fingers shook as I dialed his number. It rang twice before he answered. "Bennett, it's been a long time," Miles said warmly. "Yes," I replied softly, "and I wish this call was for something good." There was a pause on the line. "What's wrong?" he asked. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. "I need your help," I said. "I think my son is planning something terrible." Outside, a crow cried from a nearby tree. The sound carried through the open window, rough and lonely. I looked at the sky, now dim with the coming dusk, and I whispered under my breath, "It's greater than Linda. I think our boy has lost his way." And that night, as the shadows stretched across the walls, I sat in silence, waiting for the voice on the other end to speak. Miles didn't rush me. He simply said, calm and steady, "It's greater than, tell me everything." I did. Every word, every sound, every cruel sentence I had heard. By the time I finished, the room had grown cold. Miles took a deep breath and said, "It's greater than, don't confront them yet. Let's see how far they'll go. I'll help you, but you must stay calm." And so I agreed. Thanksgiving would come. They would come. And this time, I would be ready. The days leading up to Thanksgiving felt longer than any week I'd ever lived. The air outside had grown sharp with the smell of cold rain, and the trees around the house stood bare thin, watchful things whispering in the wind. Inside, everything looked the same as always, but I felt different. Every sound, every shadow seemed to carry meaning. I moved slowly through the house that week, dusting the shelves, checking the locks, trying to look busy. But truthfully, I was preparing not for a celebration, but for the moment Truth would walk through my front door wearing a smile. Miles came by 2 days before the dinner. He parked far down the dirt road so no one would notice his car. He stepped into the living room quietly, taking in the place with those steady eyes of his. "Still feels like Linda's house," he said softly. I nodded. "She made it a home. I just live here." He didn't smile. Instead, he looked around carefully. "You sure you want to go through with this, Harold? It won't be easy, seeing them sit across from you pretending to love you." I gave a slow breath. "It's not about easy, Miles. It's about knowing. I need to look them in the eyes and see what's left of the son I raised." He didn't argue after that. Together, we started setting things up quietly. Miles installed 2 small cameras, one near the hallway, another just above the mantel clock in the dining room. Both were nearly invisible. He also placed a small recorder under the edge of the table. If they try anything, he said, we'll have proof. But remember, act natural. Be the same father they expect. I've been pretending my whole life, I said dryly. One more day won't kill me. That night, after Miles left, I sat by the fire for hours, staring at the flickering light. I thought about Evan's first Thanksgiving as a boy, how he'd carved his name into the table with a spoon and then cried because he thought his mother would be angry. Linda had only laughed, kissing his forehead and saying, "Now is your table too." Now that same table was polished clean, the marks still faint but there, a small scar from a time when love was simple. On the morning of Thanksgiving, I woke early. The house was quiet, filled with that fragile stillness that only comes before something happens. I put on Linda's old apron and began to cook. The smell of roasted herbs filled the air, mingling with the faint hum of the oven. It almost felt normal. Almost. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Evan. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice bright, a little too bright. "We're on our way. Should be there in an hour." "Drive safe," I replied. "Dinner will be waiting." I set the phone down and took a slow breath. My hands were steady now. No fear, just a quiet readiness. Miles texted me soon after. "It's greater than I'm nearby. I'll stay out of sight until needed." I stood by the window as the clouds rolled across the gray sky. The wind picked up, rattling the old wind chime Linda had hung years ago. Its soft, uneven notes filled the air like a warning whisper from somewhere beyond. When the first car lights appeared at the end of the road, I felt my heart thump once, heavy and slow. Evan's black sedan pulled into the driveway, its tires crunching over the gravel. I watched as they stepped out. Evan wore a neat coat, his hair slicked back, a polite smile fixed on his face. Clara followed behind him, dressed perfectly as always, holding a covered dish she didn't need to bring. Her eyes scanned the house like a cat walking to someone else's territory. I opened the door before they could knock. "Welcome home," I said, my voice calm. Evan smiled. "Thanks, Dad. You look good." I nodded, pretending not to notice how his eyes darted toward the kitchen, the hallway, and back again. Clara kissed my cheek, her perfume sweet but sharp, and said, "It's so nice to be here again. It feels familiar." I gestured toward the dining table, already set with silverware, wine glasses, and the same white tablecloth Linda had always used. "Everything's ready," I said. As they stepped inside, I caught a faint reflection of them in the hallway mirror, two figures smiling politely, each one hiding something behind their eyes. I closed the door gently behind them, locking it without a sound. And for the first time in years, my home was full again. But the warmth I felt wasn't from family. It was from knowing that this time, I wasn't alone. The sky had turned a deep gray by the time we sat down for dinner. The wind outside whistled softly through the chimney, and the faint crackle of the fire filled the quiet between us. The table looked perfect the same way Linda used to set it. Every plate was in its place. The silverware gleamed, and the roasted turkey sat in the center like a centerpiece of peace that didn't exist. "Looks wonderful, Dad," Evan said, smiling too widely. "Just like old times." "Just like old times," I echoed, though we both knew it wasn't. Clara reached for the serving spoon. "You really outdid yourself, Mr. Bennett," she said sweetly. "I don't know how you managed this all alone." Her words were sugar-coated, but her tone carried something else, impatience. She kept glancing toward the kitchen door, her hand brushing against her purse every few minutes. Evan noticed me watching her and forced a laugh. "Clara can't believe you still cook everything from scratch," he said. "She thinks you are some kind of magician." I smiled faintly. Old habits die hard. For a moment, we ate in silence. The sound of forks tapping against plates filled the room. I could feel every heartbeat, every small sound. It was as if time itself had slowed, waiting for something unseen to happen. Evan raised his glass. "To family," he said. Clara followed. "And to new beginnings." I lifted my glass slowly. "And to truth," I said. Their eyes flicked toward me for a moment, quick, uncertain, before they clinked their glasses with mine. The wine touched my lips but didn't pass them. I had learned long ago that sometimes silence was safer than questions. As we ate, Evan began to relax. He started talking about his new business plans, about how hard things had been, and how he was finally turning things around. Clara nodded proudly beside him, her voice smooth as she added, "Once we settle some family matters, things will get even better." I let her words hang in the air. "Family matters," I repeated quietly. "Yes, they have a way of settling themselves." Her fork paused midair. Evan shifted slightly in his chair. But I smiled, gentle and harmless, and the tension eased just a little. When the main course was done, Clara stood and said, "Let me bring dessert. I made something special." She disappeared into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the tiles. Evan leaned back and sighed. "She's been excited about this all week, Dad. Wanted it to be memorable." I nodded, studying his face. Beneath his easy grin, something twitched nerves, maybe guilt. I couldn't tell. The smell of vanilla and something faintly bitter drifted from the kitchen. A moment later, Clara returned carrying a tray of small glasses filled with custard and whipped cream. "Homemade," she said proudly. "My own recipe." She placed one in front of each of us. "Try it while it's still warm," she urged. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes sharp. Watching, measuring. I didn't touch mine. Evan picked up his spoon, then noticed I hadn't moved. "Dad?" he said lightly. "You're not eating?" I smiled faintly. "In a moment. I just want to say something first." They both looked at me. "I know we've had our differences," I began, "and I haven't been the easiest father. But I'm thankful you both came tonight. It means more than you know." Clara softened her expression, pretending warmth. "Of course, we wouldn't miss it for the world." "I know," I said. Then I looked toward the window where faint headlights flickered down the road slow, deliberate. My heart steadied. "Still," I added, "it's nice to have someone watching over family. Someone who cares." Evan frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the door. 3 slow knocks. Clara froze, her spoon clinking against the glass. Evan looked toward the hallway. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked. I set down my napkin. "Yes," I said simply, "I am." I stood up and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of their eyes on my back. The fire crackled behind me, and the house seemed to hold its breath. I opened the door. Detective Miles Carter stood there, coat damp from the drizzle, his face calm but unreadable. He glanced at me, then past me, to where Evan and Clara sat motionless at the table. "Evening," he said quietly. "Sorry to interrupt dinner." I stepped aside. "You're right on time." Miles walked in slowly, the sound of his wet shoes echoing on the wood floor. He looked at the untouched custard on the table, the nervous faces, the tension thick enough to touch. Clara tried to smile. "Detective, what a surprise." Miles nodded politely. "Thanksgiving's full of surprises," he said. "Mind if I sit?" Evan's hand twitched toward his glass. "What's going on, Dad?" I didn't answer. I just met his eyes, the way I used to when he was a boy and had done something wrong, not angry, just disappointed. The fire crackled louder. And in that silence, something inside the room shifted a stillness heavy with truth about to break loose. Miles hung his coat over the back of a chair and sat down slowly, his eyes never leaving Evan and Clara. The room had gone so quiet that the soft tick of the mantel clock sounded like a hammer striking metal. The fire popped once, sending a small spark drifting upward. Evan tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin. "I don't understand," he said. "Why is a detective here on Thanksgiving?" Miles folded his hands on the table. "Because your father invited me," he said evenly. "He thought it might be nice to have an old friend around. Turns out he was right." Clara looked at me sharply. "You invited him?" she asked. I met her gaze. "Yes, it seemed safer that way." Her smile vanished. She glanced quickly toward Evan, whose jaw had tightened. "Safer?" he repeated. "Dad, what's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached beneath the table and pressed a small button under the edge one of the devices Miles had hidden earlier. A faint click came from the mantel clock, followed by a soft whir. Then, through the small speaker, came their voices. "It's greater than that old man won't last a day after our Thanksgiving surprise." Evan's voice said clearly. Clara's voice followed, cold and confident. The house will be ours. The sound filled the dining room like poison made audible. Evan's face drained of color. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, but no words came out. Miles leaned back slightly. You two should know, he said quietly. That wasn't the only thing we recorded. There are other tapes. Proof enough of what you bought, what you mixed, and how you plan to use it tonight. He nodded toward the untouched custard on the table. Would you like me to tell you what's in that dessert? Evan's hands began to shake. No, he whispered. Clara found her voice sharp and trembling. You can't prove. Miles cut her off. We already have. The store clerk confirmed your purchase this morning. The recording is time-stamped. It's over, Clara. I sat back in my chair, my heart heavy but steady. I didn't want to believe it, I said softly. Even after I heard you that day, I told myself there must be some mistake, that my son, my own blood, would never do something like this. Evan's head dropped, his eyes fixed on the table. Dad, please, he whispered. You don't understand. We were desperate. I do understand, I said quietly. I understand that you chose greed over love. I gave you everything I could, but you wanted what wasn't yours to take. Clara turned to Miles. You can't arrest us, she said, her voice cracking. He's lying. This is a setup. Miles sighed and stood. I'm not here to arrest you tonight, he said. I'm here to make sure no one gets hurt. But you both need to come with me for questioning. Evan looked at me again, eyes wet and full of something close to fear. Dad, I didn't mean to. Yes, you did, I said softly, and that's what hurts the most. Miles stepped forward, taking out his phone to make a call. Two other officers entered moments later, quiet and professional. They didn't handcuff them, not yet. They simply guided them toward the door. As Evan reached the threshold, he turned back. Dad, he said, his voice breaking, please forgive me. I looked at him, and for the first time that night, I saw not the man he'd become, but the little boy he once was, the one who used to carve his name into my table and laugh when his mother scolded him. I already did, I said, but forgiveness doesn't erase what's been done. He nodded faintly, then followed Clara out into the cold night. The door closed behind them, and the house fell silent again. Miles remained a moment longer, standing by the fire. You handled that better than most would, he said quietly. I didn't feel like I had a choice, I replied. When family turns against you, anger doesn't fix it. It only spreads the rot. He gave a slow nod. Will you be all right? I looked at the empty chairs, the untouched dessert, the faint warmth still lingering in the air. I've been alone before, I said. But tonight, it feels different. It feels final. Miles placed a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, Harold. After he left, I walked to the front porch. The rain had stopped. The night sky hung heavy with clouds, but one small star managed to shine through. I breathed in the cold air and looked up toward it. Linda, I whispered. It's over now. He's safe from himself, maybe. And so am I. The wind chimes swayed gently. It sounds soft and uneven, like a sigh. I turned back toward the house, the faint glow of the fire still flickering inside. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange kind of peace, the quiet kind that comes after a storm finally passes. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.